The water ran over her gloves in a thin, steady sheet, turning pink as it carried the blood away. Dr. Maya Carter watched it swirl down the steel basin, then flicked her fingers once and reached for a fresh pair of gloves. The overhead fluorescence hummed. Somewhere beyond the double doors, an EKG monitor cried in a high, thin rhythm. Her hands were the only things that did not hesitate. Back in trauma. Or 3. The air smelled of cauterized tissue and antiseptic. A young man lay on the table, chest open, ribs pulled apart. The bullet had torn through muscle and lung before lodging near a branching artery. His chart said John Doe. No ID, no family in the waiting room. Clamp, Maya said. The scrub nurse dropped the instrument into her palm. Maya's fingers closed around the clamp as if they had been born to that shape. She slipped it into the bloody cavity, hunting for the subtle pulse of a hidden vessel. There. A faint throb against metal. She pinched, tightened, and the field went a shade less red. Heart rate is creeping down, the anesthesiologist called. 82 pressure holding. Good, Maya murmured. We keep it that way. A bead of sweat slid from her temple, caught at the edge of her mask. She ignored it. The rest of the room felt far away. The beep of the monitors, the hiss of the ventilator, the muffled thunder of a helicopter arriving on the roof. All background. Just the wound in her hands. The door banged open. Stop what you're doing and step away from the table. The voice had the cut-glass edge of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Heads jerked up. A nurse flinched, knocking a tray so that a pair of forceps clattered to the floor. Maya did not look away from the field. Dr. Hargrove. The charge nurse said, breathless, "We paged you, but you were still in transit. He came in crashing. She had to open him." "She does not have clearance to touch this case," Dr. Charles Hargrove said. He was tall, silver hair, carefully combed back surgical cap, still slung in one hand. Even under the limp blue paper gown, the lines of his tailored shirt and tie were visible. The wall behind him held a framed photo of him shaking hands with a senator. He liked to operate with the door propped just open enough to see it. "I am almost done," Maya said. "You can yell at me in 10 minutes. Hargrove stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the open chest. "You are a trauma attending with less than a year at this institution," he said, his tone clipped. "You were supposed to stabilize and wait. We have protocols for a reason." Maya shifted the clamp slightly. The bleeding slowed another notch. "I have 15 years of experience," she said. 15 years where... He let out a short laugh. "Some rural clinic YouTube?" A couple of residents at the back of the room snorted. No one else did. The anesthesiologist kept his eyes on the monitor. The scrub nurse watched the floor. Maya finally looked up. Under the cap, her dark hair was twisted into a tight knot. Her eyes were an unreadable shade somewhere between gray and brown, the color of wet stone. "Pressure is 85/50, she said calmly. "If I step away, he bleeds out in under a minute. You can take over or you can keep talking." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the beep of the heart monitor and the soft wheeze of the ventilator. Hargrove's jaw clenched. "Give me the clamp," he said. The door crashed open again, this time hard enough to slam into the stopper. 3 figures in dark suits filled the frame, shoulders wet with rain, short haircuts, lanyards flashing badges that caught the operating room light. The scrub nurse swore under her breath. The lead agent scanned the room once, then fixed on Maya. "Dr. Maya Elise Carter," he said. Her fingers tightened slightly on the clamp. "Busy," she replied without looking away. "We need you to come with us. Right now, code black." The words landed with a weight that did not belong inside a hospital. Monitors kept beeping. The ventilator kept hissing. Somewhere an alarm on a forgotten IV pump chimed in a tinny pattern. Maya held the clamp steady, then angled her head enough to meet the agent's eyes. "Then you picked a bad time," she said. His gaze dropped to the open chest, the pool of blood, the way her hands moved with eerie certainty. "We will wait," he said, "outside." He stepped back. The door swung shut behind them with a soft hiss. Maya turned back to the wound. "Let us finish saving this one," she said quietly. The anesthesiologist glanced at the clock. "Time is 02:17, he said. Maya placed one more suture, tied it off with quick, precise motions, then another, sealing off the artery that had tried so hard to empty the young man onto the table. "Chest tube ready," she said. As she worked, a thin line of water from earlier had dried along the back of her wrist, leaving a pale trace over a faint, jagged scar partly covered by the glove. No one in that room asked where the scar came from. No one yet. 3 months earlier. The glass facade of St. Augustine Medical Center caught the morning light and threw it back at the city. Chicago's wind curled around the corner of the building, snapping at coat hems and tugging at visitor badges. Cars lined up at the patient drop-off lane, exhaust puffing in white clouds. Maya stepped out of a rideshare, slung a duffel bag over one shoulder, and stood there for a moment with her hand in her pocket. The hospital towered over her, a clean white monolith with the hospital name etched deep into stone. She let her fingers curl around the smooth metal of an ID badge clipped to her lapel. The picture on it showed her looking slightly surprised, like someone who had not expected to be captured on camera that day. Inside, the lobby smelled of coffee floor wax and something floral from a gift shop. A grand staircase led up to a mezzanine where donors' names were etched in gold. Along one wall, framed photographs displayed the hospital's proudest moments. Surgeons in crisp coats shaking hands with mayors, governors, celebrities. Front and center, a large photo of Dr. Charles Hargrove receiving an award plaque in hand, smile polished. Maya's gaze paused on it for half a second. Her hand brushed the cuff of her shirt back, fingers touching the faint ridge of scar tissue under her wrist. Then she turned away and headed for the staff elevators. In a second-floor conference room, a group of new hires waited around a long table. Some checked phones, others adjusted fresh white coats. A stack of welcome folders sat neatly arranged at one end. A young woman with dark hair pulled into a ponytail slid into the chair beside Maya and dropped a paper cup of coffee on the table a little too hard. The lid popped, splashing a dark drop onto the wood. "Morning," she said. "Sorry, my hands think it is still night." Maya gave her a sideways glance. The woman's badge read, "Jenna Morales, RN, Emergency Department." "Maya Carter," Maya said. "Trauma surgery." "Yeah, I saw the list," Jenna replied. "Welcome to St. Holy Ego General." Maya's mouth twitched. "That is not on the logo," she said. "Give it a week," Jenna said, lowering her voice. "You will see. They hang diplomas like wallpaper around here." The medical director walked in, followed by a woman from HR with a bright smile and a stack of forms. Orientation began. Policies, parking rules, scrub color codes. The words washed over Maya. She listened, but her attention kept snagging on other things. The way the air conditioning hummed a fraction too loudly. The sharp smell of dry erase marker. The tremor in the hand of a nervous intern across the table twisting a pen. When it was her turn to introduce herself, she kept it simple. "Dr. Maya Carter," she said, "trauma surgery. Transferred from a hospital in Central Texas. Previous experience includes military service." The HR woman added, glancing at her notes. "Details unspecified. Thank you for your service." A couple of people nodded vaguely and went back to their phones. It was a line they had heard before, attached to strangers whose stories they would never know. Later in the staff lounge, Jenna cornered her at the coffee machine. "Central Texas, huh?" Jenna said. "I'm guessing not the fun part, with tacos and live music." "There were tacos," Maya said. "Music too, sometimes." "Let me guess," Jenna went on. "Tiny hospital, short staff, everything held together with duct tape and coffee." "Something like that," Maya said. There was a buzz at Jenna's hip. She pulled her pager out, frowned. "Trauma alert in the bay," she said. "Welcome tour is over." The trauma bay was all bright light in motion. A paramedic shouted vitals over the noise as they wheeled in a man whose shirt was soaked dark. 28-year-old male stab wound to the left chest, he called. Pressure 80/40, tacky at 130. Lost a lot of blood on scene. "Get him on 3, someone barked. Maya hung back for a breath, watching the choreography. Nurses moved in sync, cutting clothes, placing lines. A young resident planted his hands on the man's sternum, hovering. "Do we wait for Hargrove?" he asked, voice higher than he probably wanted it. The monitor screamed a flat, high tone for a second, then found a weak rhythm again. "No," Maya said. She stepped in the current, parting around her for a heartbeat. The space near the table cleared just enough. "Somebody get me a thoracotomy tray," she said. The resident blinked at her. "What?" "Tray," she repeated. "Now, he will not make it upstairs." There was a half-second of hesitation, then Jenna's voice cut in. "You heard her. Move." Maya pulled on another pair of gloves, the latex snapping around her wrists. The skin beneath was already damp. The smell of iron was heavy now, mixed with the sharp scent of chlorhexidine. She felt the old calm settle over her shoulders like a familiar weight. "Scalpel," she said. The first cut opened skin and muscle along the left side of the man's chest. Blood welled, but that was expected. Her movements were lean, economical. A rib spreader creaked as she widened the gap. The room narrowed to the beating heart, sluggish and struggling. "Pericardial tamponade," she said quietly. "He is drowning in his own blood." She slit the sac around the heart. Dark fluid poured out. The monitor jerked the line on the screen, gaining strength. "See that?" she said to the resident, not looking up. "You do not always get time to wait for someone with nicer degrees on their wall." He swallowed and nodded, face pale behind his mask. When they finally rolled the patient toward surgery, stabilized for the moment, the attending for that shift arrived, hair still damp from the rain outside. "I heard you cracked a chest in my bay," he said, half impressed, half annoyed. Maya stripped off her gloves. The skin of her hands was wrinkled from sweat and water. The scar on her wrist stood out a little whiter against the flesh. "He needed it," she said. "Next time," he replied, "run it by me first." Next time, Maya said, I hope we do not need one. Jenna caught up with her in the hallway afterward. Whatever that Texas place was, Jenna said softly, it trained the hell out of you. Maya's eyes flicked to a small window at the end of the corridor. Beyond the glass, the sky over Chicago was flat and gray, the kind of gray that did not belong to any particular season. There were a lot of patients, she said. She did not mention sand or helicopters or the sound of sirens that did not come from ambulances. Not yet. By the end of her first month, people had started talking about Maya Carter. Not loudly, not in front of her. The comments lived in doorways and hall corners in the quiet between pages and cafeteria lines. Did you see her crack that chest in the bay? She moves like she has done it under fire. Her file says Central Texas. That is not a Central Texas kind of move. Maya ignored most of it. She took the worst overnight shifts, the ones no one wanted, and walked home with the dawn light in her eyes and the smell of antiseptic still in her hair. Her hand stayed steady on the scalpel. Her charting was neat and spare. To some of the residents, she was something to imitate. To others, she was a threat they did not know how to name. To Dr. Charles Hargrove, she was a problem. At a Monday morning morbidity and mortality conference, the theater was crowded. A case of a missed bowel injury was being dissected on the large screen, each decision picked apart under an unforgiving light. When it ended, Hargrove stepped up to the podium. He wore his white coat, buttoned his name embroidered in navy thread. Before we conclude, he said, there is another issue we need to address. The murmur in the room dimmed. He clicked the remote. A slide appeared, attending staff credentials trauma surgery. A list of names. At the bottom in smaller font, Maya E. Carter, MD. Our newest trauma attending Hargrove. Joel. Yoting, Hargrove said. On paper, Dr. Carter has completed basic surgical training and held a position at a modest regional hospital. She claims, however, to have more than 15 years of clinical experience. A faint stir. Heads turned toward where Maya sat near the back. Dr. Carter. Hargrove said, his gaze finding her. Perhaps you would like to tell us where those years were spent, since they do not seem to appear in any residency program we recognize. Maya felt every eye tip toward her. The room smelled of coffee gone cold and stale carpet. She rose from her seat. In field hospitals, she said. In war zones, places without air conditioning, places where the walls shook. A few people shifted in their chairs. Hargrove's smile did not reach his eyes. How convenient, he said. No board certifying those, unfortunately, and no simple way for us to verify. He waited, perhaps expecting a longer defense and argument, some plea to authority. Maya simply nodded once and sat back down. The silence that followed was not quite comfortable. After the conference in the hallway, Jenna fell into step beside her. They are not used to people who give short answers, Jenna said. I noticed, Maya said. Heavier cases started landing in Hargrove's lap as winter deepened. St. Augustine liked to attract them. It looked good in reports when famous names were saved within its walls. On a clear night in January, a trauma page went out for a rollover on the expressway. The overhead speaker crackled. Level 1 trauma, male 20 years old, motor vehicle collision, transport time 10 minutes. What is the name? A nurse asked. The paramedic on the line answered. The name went straight up the chain. Within minutes, word had run ahead of the gurney. The patient was the only child of Senator Owen Kincaid, a man whose name was also etched on the donor wall in gold. Hargrove was scrubbed and waiting when the trauma team burst through the double doors of OR1 with the senator's son. Maya and Jenna watched from the observation deck, palms pressed lightly to the glass. Below, the room glowed under the surgical lights. Everything gleamed. Car versus guardrail at highway speed, Jenna said quietly. That is a mess, even on a good day. On the table, the young man looked smaller than he had in the photos that scrolled across the news tickers now running on every television in the hospital. Hargrove opened the abdomen with a measured incision, the kind that had won him teaching awards. Blood pooled dark and thick. Suction, he said. Retract lap pads. His movements were precise, but there was a tightness in his shoulders. Maya watched the pattern of the blood, the way it welled where it hid. He is looking in the wrong place, she said. Jenna glanced at her. Where would you look? Jenna asked. Mesentery, Maya said. The bleed is deep, near the root. You can tell from the way it refills when he takes the suction away. On the table below the monitor, numbers began to slip. Pressure is dropping, the anesthesiologist called. 70/40. He is not holding volume. Hargrove frowned, changing his angle, hunting along a loop of bowel. Another gush of blood flooded the field. More suction, he said sharply. Clamp here. Maya exhaled. He is going to lose him, she said. You cannot go down there, Jenna replied. He will have security escort you out of the building. On the monitor, the heart rate spiked, then faltered. The anesthesiologist looked up at Hargrove. We are running out of time, he said. For a moment, the operating room below felt like a stage waiting for a missed cue. Hargrove looked up toward the glass. His gaze met Maya's through their reflections. Whatever he saw there was enough. He stepped back half a pace. Maya was already moving. She pushed through the observation room door and took the stairs fast. Jenna followed, heart pounding. In OR1, a circulating nurse opened the door just as Maya reached it. "You cannot be in here," the nurse started. Maya slipped past. "Clamp," she said, already pulling on another pair of gloves. Hargrove opened his mouth to object, but she was at the table now, her eyes focused on the wound. "Retract a little higher," she said, voice even. "You are compressing the wrong segment. There." Her hand slid into the cavity. Warmth closed around her fingers. The smell of iron was sharp familiar. She felt for the pulse she knew would be there, small and frantic. Her fingertips brushed it. "Here," she said. She applied pressure and nodded. "Now we can see." Under the lights, her hands moved in clean lines. Clamp, tie, cut. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The scrub nurse stopped watching Hargrove and started watching her instead. With each stitch, the blood in the field lessened. The suction tip finally ran mostly clear. "Pressure is returning," the anesthesiologist said. 80/50, climbing. Hargrove stood opposite her, silent. His face had gone pale beneath his mask. When the last suture was tied and the worst of the bleeding tamed, Maya stepped back. "You can close," she said. She stripped off her gloves, dropped them into the bin, and walked out without looking to see if he had moved. In the scrub room, Jenna caught up to her. "That was his case," Jenna said. "His trophy case, his donor board case." "He will still get the credit," Maya said, turning on the water. She washed her hands longer than usual. The soap stung the tiny cracks in her skin. "He will also be alive," Maya added. The next morning, a message appeared in Maya's inbox. "Meeting with department head and HR, mandatory." The conference room was smaller this time, the blinds half closed. A woman from HR sat at the table with a stack of papers. Hargrove stood by the window, hands in his coat pockets, jaw tense. "Dr. Carter," the HR woman began, "thank you for coming in." Maya sat, her chair creaked. "We have been reviewing your file," the woman continued. "There are some discrepancies between your reported years of experience and the documentation we can obtain from civilian institutions. Your military record," Hargrove said, turning, "is largely redacted. We cannot see where you were posted. We cannot see what you did. For all we know, you could have been in an office." Maya folded her hands in her lap. "I was not in an office," she said. She said, "Be that as it may," the HR woman said, glancing at him. "The hospital has policies. We cannot verify a significant portion of your claimed experience. In addition, yesterday you entered an operating room and took over a high-profile case without authorization. That puts the institution at risk." Maya said nothing. The ticking of a clock on the wall slipped into the quiet. "We are placing you on immediate suspension," the woman said, "pending a full review of your credentials and conduct." She slid a form across the table. The word suspension sat in bold letters near the top. "We expect your cooperation," Hargrove said. "This is not a criminal matter, yet." Maya picked up the pen. It fit her hand poorly, too light after the instruments she lived with. She signed her name in neat, steady strokes. In the hallway outside, Jenna waited, shifting her weight from foot to foot. When Maya emerged carrying a thin manila envelope, Jenna stepped forward. "How bad is it?" Jenna asked. "They suspended me," Maya said. "You are joking." Maya shook her head. "For saving the senator's kid." "For existing in their blind spot," Maya said, "and for not staying in my lane." "You are just going to let them do that?" Jenna asked. "No lawyer, no appeal, nothing." Maya offered a faint smile. "I have been dismissed by people with better aim," she said. "I will survive." "This is not a joke," Jenna said. "I know," Maya said. "I'm going to clean out my locker." That evening, Jenna sat alone at a computer terminal in a corner of the nurses' station, the screen casting a bluish light over her face. The bustle of the ER went on around her, beeps and voices and rolling wheels. She logged into the hospital system and pulled up Maya's file. It was all standard: medical school, residency, the hospital in Texas. At the bottom, in a small font, as if the system itself had tried to hide it, there was a line. "Prior service United States Army, assignment details classified." Jenna stared at the word. Classified. She opened a browser tab, typed Maya's name and Army and surgeon scanning scanning the results. There were plenty of Mayas, plenty of Carters, plenty of veterans, but nothing that fit. She sat back, drumming her fingers on the desk. In her mind, she saw again the way Maya's hands had moved in the senator's son, the way she had called the tamponade in the trauma bay, as if she were reading from a script she had written herself. There were stories buried in that file, stories that did not make it to donor walls. 2 days later, Maya stood in front of her open locker, a cardboard box at her feet. The locker was almost bare. She had never put much into it. A coffee mug with a chipped rim, a worn pair of sneakers, a small photo tucked into the back corners curled. 4 people in faded uniforms squinting against a harsh sun, a helicopter shadow behind them. Someone's arm slung around her shoulders. She looked at the picture for a long moment, then set it gently into the box. The overhead intercom crackled. "All available personnel to emergency department," a voice said. "Mass casualty alert. Repeat mass casualty alert. Explosion downtown. Multiple critical incoming." For a heartbeat, the only sound in the locker room was the distant thrum of running feet in the corridor beyond. Maya stood very still. The box waited at her feet. Sirens began to wail outside, not one but many overlapping. Somewhere a helicopter chopped at the air. The hospital seemed to tilt slightly toward the sound. She closed the locker door. The metal clicked softly. In the hallway, the flow of people ran toward the ER badges, swinging shoes squeaking. Someone brushed past her shoulder with an apology already trailing behind them. Jenna appeared at the end of the corridor, hair coming loose from its tie eyes wide. "Maya," she said, "you cannot. You are suspended. If Hargrove sees you in the bay, he will lose his mind." Maya looked past her toward the double doors that led to the emergency department. Alarms were already sounding on the far side. The smell of smoke rode in on the air conditioning, thin but unmistakable. "He can have whatever reaction he wants," Maya said. She set the box down against the base of the lockers. "People are bleeding," she said. "I am not going home." Jenna caught her arm for half a second. "When this is over," Jenna said, "I am pretending you did not just say that to me." "When this is over," Maya said, "I hope you're sleeping." She slipped her arm free and strode toward the ER. The emergency department had transformed. Stretchers lined the hallway. Triage tags dangled in yellow, red, and black. The air was thick with voices and the metallic smell of blood and burned fabric. A television near the waiting room showed a shaky live feed of a plume of smoke climbing over downtown siren sound bleeding into the already loud room. A nurse at the triage station saw Maya and opened her mouth, but another gurney crashed in behind and whatever complaint she had died under the incoming wave. The first patient thrust at Maya was an older woman with glass embedded in her neck and shoulder, her blouse soaked dark. "Breathing but shallow," the paramedic said. "Blood pressure barely there." Maya pressed gloved fingers to the woman's neck, feeling the fluttering pulse, then moved the collar of her blouse. "Get me a central line kit, Chukwa," she said, "and 2 units of O negative, now." She slid an IV in her hands, finding the vein on the first try, despite the sweat on the woman's skin. The next patient had a collapsed lung. The one after that had an abdomen bored hard under Maya's fingers, peritoneum already inflamed. A child came in, carried by a firefighter, face streaked with ash, eyes wide. Each time Maya's focus narrowed. Tube, line, pressure, airway. She barked orders that the residents obeyed without pausing to ask who had the right to give them. Her voice cut through the noise clear and calm. "Do not look at the blood," she told a trembling intern as they hovered over a man whose leg had been nearly torn off. "Look at what you can fix. Tourniquet higher. Tighten until you think it is enough, then another turn." Overhead, the loudspeaker called names of surgeons, radiologists, backup teams. The floor vibrated slightly with the constant traffic of gurneys and carts. 20 minutes into the chaos, Dr. Hargrove pushed through the doors from the stairwell, hair disheveled, tie askew. A hospital administrator trailed behind him, trying to hand him a clipboard. "We need you to coordinate surgical triage," the administrator said. "We are getting overflow from 2 other facilities already." Hargrove scanned the room, eyes landing on a familiar figure bent over a gurney in trauma 2. Maya. She was inserting a chest tube, movements efficient. Air hissed out in a sharp rush, followed by a bloom of pink froth. The patient's oxygen saturation began to climb on the monitor. "What is she doing here?" Hargrove snapped. The administrator blinked. "She is working the red zone," the said. "She got here before I did." "She is suspended," Hargrove said. His voice rose. "Security." A guard near the entrance looked up, caught between the shout and the stretcher he was helping to steer. Before the guard could move, the bay door slammed open again. "Make way," a paramedic yelled. "Priority 1. Make way." The gurney that came through was flanked by 2 men in dark jackets. Unlike the others, their clothes were not shredded business suits or party dresses. Their jackets were practical. Their boots looked like they could handle rough ground. The man on the stretcher wore a torn dark shirt. His hair was clipped short. A black watch still clung to his wrist, its face cracked but functioning. His abdomen was wrapped in bandages already soaked through. "Who is this?" Hargrove demanded. "Male, mid-30s, the paramedic said, breathless. "Found near the blast center. Tactical gear under his clothes. No ID. They say he is federal. They told us he is priority 1. The 2 men flanking the stretcher produced badges, flashed them so quickly the details blurred. "We were told to get him to an operating room," one of them said. "Your best trauma surgeon, immediately." Hargrove straightened. You have him, he said. Or one. Prep for emergency laparotomy now. Nurses moved to wheel the gurney away. The man's head lolled to one side. For a brief second, his half-closed eyes seemed to fix on the ceiling, then slipped away again. Maya stood at the edge of the red zone chest, still heaving from her last run between beds. She watched the gurney pass, watched the blood that trailed in a thin line on the floor behind it. Her fingers flexed inside her gloves as if remembering a grip they had used too many times before. The OR door swung closed behind the small procession, leaving the echo of the paramedic's words hanging in the charged air. Priority 1. The Priority 1 case went straight past the line of stretchers to the end of the corridor where the double doors marked operating suites waited. Or 3, Hargrove said. Call anesthesia, tell them I want the chief. The gurney bumped through the doors. For a moment, the noise of the emergency department dulled behind the heavy glass. The air in the surgical wing was cooler, drier, filled with the smell of scrub soap instead of blood and smoke. Maya stood in the hallway watching the doors close. Her own gloves were streaked dark. Her scrubs carried a spray of dried droplets across the front. Jenna came up beside her chest, heaving. You should sit, Jenna said. You have been running this bay for 20 minutes. I am fine. Maya, head? Her voice sounded steady. Her pulse felt anything but. Through the glass panel in the doors, she could see the back of the gurney as it rolled toward OR3. The man's bandages had already soaked through, leaving a darker stain that spread as they watched. Federal, Jenna said under her breath. Figures. What makes you say that? Maya asked. Those agents with him, Jenna replied. I know that look. I did a ride along with paramedics last year. We brought in a marshal, same boots, same watch. They both stood there for a moment, caught between the chaos of the emergency department and the calm of the surgical wing. Then another ambulance screeched into the bay and someone shouted for more hands and the pause broke. Go, Maya said. They need you in triage. You too, Jenna replied. I will be there in a second, Maya said. Jenna hesitated, then turned and ran back toward the noise. Maya walked toward the scrub room of OR3. She did not step in. She stopped just inside the doorway where she could see through the small window into the operating room. The man from the blast lay on the table under harsh light. His torso was a map of bruises and burns. The abdomen was open now, the skin incised in a straight line that split the bandages. Inside, blood pooled and glistened. Hargrove stood at the table, hands already deep in the cavity. The chief anesthesiologist watched the monitors, his face tight. Pressure is 60/30, the anesthesiologist said. Heart rate 150. Clamp, Hargrove said. Suction, I cannot see a thing. The scrub nurse handed instruments. The suction device whispered as it drew fluid from the wound, then gurgled when it hit edges of tissue. Looks like multiple fragments, one of the residents said. Liver is torn, spleen is shredded. It is not just that, Hargrove muttered. Something behind it. He reached deeper, blood welled again dark and thick. More suction, he snapped. Where is it coming from? Maya watched his shoulders. The slight tremor there was more obvious than he probably realized. Her eyes tracked the pattern of the blood, the way it rose, the way it refused to be tamed. The pool did not spread evenly. It pulsed in a rhythm that told its own story. She had seen that rhythm before in places that did not have polished floors. Inside the room, the anesthesiologist frowned. Pressure is 50/20, he said. If we do not control this now, he will arrest. Hargrove dug deeper, lips pressed tight. Clamp here, he said. The resident obeyed, jaw clenched. The blood did not slow. Maya opened the scrub sink tap a little, letting cold water run over her already clean hands. It disguised the urge to walk through the second door. She heard the monitor shift into a more frantic beep. He is bradying down, the anesthesiologist said. We are losing him. Cardiac massage ready, a nurse said. Through the glass, Hargrove's eyes flicked up just for a heartbeat toward the scrub room window. He saw her. For a moment, they simply looked at one another. His gaze held anger, pride, something else underneath. Hers held none of that. Only calculation and a question. He looked back at the field. Clamp, there, he said, pointing. The resident hesitated. There is nothing there, the resident whispered. Do it, Hargrove ordered. Maya closed the tap. She stepped into the scrub room, fully pushed her sleeves higher, and began to scrub in. The circulating nurse turned startled. Dr. Carter, she said, you are not on this case. I am now, Maya replied. She watched quickly, the motions automatic. Fingers, palms, forearms, undernails. Rinse, again. Inside, the anesthesiologist spoke over the rising alarm. Pressure 40/20, he is going. The doors between scrub room and OR opened with a soft hiss. The air inside felt warmer, heavy with body heat and the metallic smell of blood. You are suspended, Hargrove said without looking up as she came in. Get out. 3-centimeter fragment source left of the aorta, Maya said. You keep chasing the liver, you will keep losing him. She held out her hands. The scrub nurse, after a tiny pause, slid gloves on. "I did not invite you," Hargrove said. "You called when you looked at the window," Maya said. "You just did not use words." He finally looked up at her. There was a silence that weighed as much as the body on the table. "Move," he said to the resident at his side. The resident stepped back so quickly that he nearly tripped over a stool. Maya took his place. The heat from the open abdomen rose to meet her. She could feel it even through the barrier of gown and gloves. The organs gleamed under the lights, dark red and slick. She could smell cauterized tissue under the sharper iron. "Suction here," she said. The suction tip followed her finger. As the blood cleared, she saw it. A deeper welling from the left side near where the great vessel curved, an area that the earlier clamps had missed entirely. "There you are," she whispered. Her left hand slid under the intestines, cupping them gently out of the way. Her right hand went in with the clamp at an angle that felt like an old routine. She felt for the pulse with the side of her finger, not the tip. "Found it. Tiny. Furious. Hold this retractor," she told the nurse. Her breath slowed. The sounds of the room retreated a little. She could still hear the monitor, but it no longer dominated. Time felt thick. She closed the clamp over the vessel with a gentle but decisive squeeze. The bleeding changed almost instantly from flood to seep. "Pressure rising," the anesthesiologist said. 50, 60, 70. "Good," Maya said. She nodded to the scrub nurse. 3-O-proline, she said, on a vascular needle. It dropped into her gloved hand. Her fingers moved in clean arcs, placing the suture around the vessel, tying it true. Once, twice. Another for safety. She removed the clamp and watched. The vessel held. The field stayed mostly dry. "Check the liver laceration again," she said to the resident, who had edged back into view. "You can pack it now. It was distracting you before." He nodded quickly, moving to obey. Maya scanned the abdomen, checking for other bleeds. Small tears that could become large problems later. Her mind walked down a familiar list. No obvious perforations there. Spleen was a lost cause, but already within the disaster she had stabilized. "Start a warmer on his fluids," she told anesthesia. "He has been open long enough." "Pressure 90/60, the anesthesiologist said. His voice held a little of the awe that no one voiced directly. When she was satisfied that the main catastrophe had been addressed, Maya stepped back from the table. "You can close," she said again. This time there was no edge to the words. She peeled off the gloves slowly, one finger at a time, and dropped them into the bin. Her hands underneath were pale, the skin wrinkled from hours of exposure to water and latex. The scar on her wrist stood out like chalk. She felt Hargrove's gaze on it, then on her face. "Who taught you that approach to the mesenteric root?" he asked quietly. Maya met his eyes. "Nobody in Chicago," she said. Before he could answer, before anyone could find the next sentence, the doors of the operating room swung open again. 3 men stepped in. Dark suits, wet shoes. Their hair was slicked by recent rain-tied knots, slightly loosened. Each wore a badge hanging from a lanyard. The scrub nurse stiffened. "You cannot be in here without proper attire," she began. "We will not be long, the man in front said. His voice was calm but carried authority that did not come from the hospital hierarchy. His badge read Central Intelligence Agency in small, serious letters. His eyes moved past Hargrove, past the others, and settled on Maya. "Dr. Maya Elise Carter," he said. She felt the room turn toward her even before she answered. "Yes," she said. "We need your presence for a classified medical emergency," he said. "It is a national security matter. We have authorization from your hospital administration to request you immediately." "You cannot just pull her in the middle of a crisis," Hargrove said. The objection came out sharper than he might have intended. The man looked at the monitors, at the now stable numbers. He let his gaze drop to the closed clamps and the packed liver. "This patient is no longer at active risk," the agent said. "And from what I am told, you were not supposed to be on this case in the first place, Dr. Hargrove." A flush rose under Hargrove's mask. "What kind of emergency?" Maya asked. "An operative injured overseas, Wigisham." Ease, the agent said. "Complex spinal involvement. He will arrive at a secure facility in less than an hour. You are one of a very limited number of surgeons with the specific field experience needed to attempt the extraction." Maya studied his face. The lines around his eyes spoke of bad nights and long flights. His suit still smelled faintly of jet fuel. "I am suspended," she said. "According to this institution, I might not be fit to write my own name." "We are aware of your status here," he replied. "We are also aware that you have operated under conditions that make this place look like a hotel lobby." Jenna appeared in the doorway of the scrub room, then breathless, her hair escaping its tie again. She took in the suits, the badges, the blood on the floor. "Is this about the guy from the blast?" she asked. "Indirectly, Shisa," the agent said. "You just saved someone very important to us. Now we are asking you to save someone even more important to a lot more people." He stepped back, leaving space in front of the door. "Dr. Carter," he said, "will you come with us?" Maya glanced at the man on the table. The nurses were already preparing to close at Hargrove's direction. The worst had passed. She looked at Hargrove. His expression was difficult to read. Pride, resentment, confusion all moved across it and then settled into something like reluctant respect. Then she looked at Jenna. Jenna's eyes were wide, but there was no question in them, only a kind of fierce, quiet support. "Go," Jenna said softly. "I have the bay." Maya nodded once. "I need to wash my hands," she said. "In the hallway, the agent replied. "We have a car waiting." She crossed to the scrub sink one last time, turned on the water, and let it run over her fingers. Blood and soap swirled together, then disappeared down the drain. She dried her hands on a fresh towel, took off her stained gown, and stepped out of the operating room toward the men in suits. As the doors whispered shut behind her, the sound of the monitors dimmed. Ahead, the corridor stretched in clean lines toward the elevator. Outside, she could already hear the faint whir of helicopter blades approaching from the distance, carrying another kind of noise toward her. The helicopter waited on the hospital roof, rotors already spinning, beating the drizzle into a fine mist that sprayed across the landing pad. Maya ducked her head against the wind as she followed the agents out of the elevator. Cold air slapped her cheeks. Her scrubs had been replaced with a set of clean ones from the OR, but they still smelled faintly of blood and iodine. "This way," the lead agent shouted over the noise. She climbed into the rear compartment, strapping herself into a seat along the side. The cabin smelled like oil and nylon and old sweat. One of the agents handed her a headset. She slipped it on, and the roar of the blades softened to a dull thudding. "Flight to a secure facility in Virginia," the pilot's voice said through the headset. "Sit tight." The helicopter lifted off. The hospital shrank below its lit windows, glowing against the dark patchwork of Chicago streets. Ambulance bays ran with flashing lights, tiny pulsing colors from this height. Maya leaned her head back against the thin cushion. The vibration traveled up her spine, familiar in a way that caught her off guard. Her hands were folded loosely in her lap. She looked down at them and saw for a moment not the faint wrinkles from scrubbing, but a different overlay. Sand in the lines of her skin, brown water in a plastic basin, a tent wall shuddering with distant impacts. She closed her eyes, the rotor noise blurred with memory. "Doctor." She opened her eyes again. The agent across from her was watching her, his expression professional but not unfriendly. "Yes," she said. "Name is Harris," he said. "You probably do not care, but it feels wrong not to introduce myself." "Harris," she repeated. "You work for the agency, Office of Special Activities," he said. "Our director has been trying to get you on a plane for 2 days." "I was not taking calls," she said. He nodded once. "We figured that out," he said. "You were busy saving our asset's partner without knowing who he was." Maya thought of the John Doe with the gunshot wound, the one Hargrove had tried to pull her off, how his heart had steadied under her hands. "You did not put that in the chart," she said. "We did not put a lot of things in that chart," Harris replied. "Compartmentalization, you remember how it works." He watched her as he said it. It was not really a question. She looked past him out the small window. Clouds slid by, lit from beneath by the glow of cities and highways. "I remember," she said. The flight smoothed out. Time stretched. Her eyes dropped closed again, not in sleep, but in something like a held breath. When the helicopter finally began to descend, the change in pitch pulled her back fully. Lights emerged below, set in a pattern that was too neat to be a random neighborhood. A large complex came into focus, surrounded by dark trees and high fences topped with coils of wire. Floodlights washed the concrete in cold white. "Welcome to Langley Annex," Harris said. They landed on a small pad tucked to one side of the complex. As soon as the blades slowed enough, someone pulled the door open from the outside. Cool night air flooded in, smelling faintly of wet earth and jet fuel. Inside the building, fluorescent lights hummed. The floors were polished to a quiet shine. The walls were plainly art limited to security signs and evacuation maps. Maya walked between Harris and another agent. Their footsteps echoed down the corridor. They passed through 2 sets of metal detectors and a biometric scanner. At each point, badges flashed. Doors unlocked with low beeps. Finally, Harris stopped in front of a door with no label, only a card reader and a small camera above it. "Director Nash is inside," he said. "He has been briefed on what happened at St. Augustine." "That must have been a fun meeting," Maya said. "Depends on your sense of humor," Harris replied. "He knows you are tired. He also knows we are on a clock." The door clicked. Harris pushed it open. The operations center looked like an odd cross between a war room and a control tower. Banks of screens covered one wall, showing maps, satellite images, and scrolling data. A handful of people sat at consoles, speaking quietly into headsets. In the center of the room, a man in his late 50s stood with his hands on the back of a chair, studying a monitor. His gray hair was trimmed short, his suit inconspicuous. He turned when they approached. Dr. Carter, he said. Dr. Carter, he said. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Did I have a choice? She asked. Technically, yes, he said. Practically no. His eyes had the tired edges of someone who had stared at bad news for a long time. There was a sharpness beneath it that reminded her of certain commanders. I am Samuel Nash, he added, Director of Special Operations Oversight. We worked with your unit in Kandahar for a while, though we never met in person. Maya studied his face. There was a flicker of recognition not of him, but of his type. You sent people to my tent in the night, she said, with no records and a lot of questions. Nash nodded once. One of them is why you are here, he said. He said. He gestured to a large screen on the wall. A scan filled it murky gray and white. The image of a spine arched down the center vertebrae stacked like ancient stones. Near the middle at the level of the chest, several small bright spots glimmered close to the spinal cord. This is our patient, Nash said. Codename Sentinel, real name Ethan Ward, 36, former Army Delta, currently working as a field operative. The image shifted, showing cross-sections. The bright fragments seemed to hover at the very edge of the spinal canal. 3 days ago, Nash continued, he took fire during an extraction in East Africa. One round grazed his lung, another shattered against bone and sent shrapnel into the spinal area. They tried to take him to a local facility, Harris said. He almost died in the attempt. We rerouted him to a forward surgical team, but they did not have the expertise to do more than stabilize. We flew him here, Nash said. He's arriving at our secure medical wing within the hour. That clock started as soon as you left Chicago. Maya stepped closer to the screen. The resolution was high enough that she could see even the slight deformities in the vertebrae, the small marks of an old compression fracture. How is his function now, she asked. Paralysis from the chest down, Harris said. Intermittent sensation in the arms. Pain spikes. His lung is under control. The spinal fragments are the real threat. We have been told that if we do not remove them soon, any swelling could make the damage permanent. Or kill him. Who told you that? Maya asked. A neurosurgical consultant out of Walter Reed, Nash said. He also told us he is not willing to attempt this operation himself. He suggested we find someone with more experience operating under extreme conditions. Someone who is used to working without a full team with high stakes and with no room for error. Nash let that settle. Someone like you, he added. Maya kept her eyes on the scan. I have done this kind of extraction twice, she said. Once in Kandahar, once in Mosul, both times in less than ideal situations. What happened to those patients? Nash asked. They walked out, she said. A small ripple of relief moved through the room, too quiet to break the surface. I'm going to need a team, she said. People who can keep up. People who will not freeze. You can pick anyone from our pool, Nash said. We have cleared several top names. Maya shook her head. I want Jenna Morales, she said. ER nurse at St. Augustine. She knows how I work. Nash nodded. Done, he said. Who else? She hesitated. Faces flickered in her mind. Different ORs, different mouths set in different lines. Charles Hargrove, she said. Harris blinked. The same doctor who suspended you this morning, he asked. The same, she said. May I ask why? Nash said. He is technically skilled, Maya said. He knows that hospital inside out. He also just watched me bail out his hands twice in 24 hours. That is a powerful motivator. Nash considered that. Our background check on Dr. Hargrove shows ego, Nash said. Also competence. And no history of compromising patient care when under direct scrutiny. He needs a case like this to remind him what matters, Maya said. I need people I do not have to train from scratch. All right, Nash said. He turned to Harris. Get Morales and Hargrove in the air. Use the fastest option. Harris nodded and stepped away, already pulling out his phone. Nash looked back at Maya. In the meantime, he said, we will take you to the medical wing. There are scans and charts the forward team sent. You can start your plan. The secure medical wing felt different from the rest of the building. There were fewer windows, more locked doors. The air was cooler. A faint antiseptic odor sharpened the sterility. In a central room, monitors waited with images ready. A light box displayed conventional X-rays. Someone had taped a hastily drawn diagram of the injury pattern to one wall arrows and notes scribbled in red marker. A woman in army green stood there, hands clasped behind her back. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun. Silver eagle pins on her shoulders marked her as a full colonel. When Maya entered, the woman straightened and offered a crisp salute. Dr. Carter, she said, it is an honor. Maya gave a short nod instead of returning the salute. Colonel, she said, you are running the medical side. Colonel Elise Monroe, the woman said. Joint Special Operations Medical Command. We have crossed paths indirectly. Your reputation travels. So I am told, Maya. Maya said. Monroe gestured to the images. You already know the basics, she said. Shrapnel near the T7 vertebra, millimeters from the spinal cord. The field team got these images in a pretty rough setting, but they are good enough to scare every neurosurgeon we showed them to. Did anyone suggest letting the fragments scar in place? Maya asked. That was option 1, Nash said from the doorway. It comes with a high chance of full paralysis and chronic pain. Option 2 is you. Maya studied the scan again. The fragments were irregular like tiny teeth. One sat particularly close to the cord, casting a small shadow. Any vascular involvement? She asked. Minor, Monroe said. The bigger vessels look untouched. It is the proximity to the cord that has everyone pacing. Good, Maya said. Bleeding I can control. Spinal cord is less forgiving. She traced a path on the image with one finger. I will need full imaging ready in the OR, she said. We are going to have to go in with magnification and very steady hands. She let her own hands hang at her sides. They trembled barely at all, the faint residual from adrenaline and exhaustion fading into her normal steadiness. How long have I been awake? She asked. Harris checked his watch. About 20 hours, he said. Get me coffee, she said. Black, no sugar, then tell me when my team lands. They landed sooner than she expected. Jenna burst through the medical wing doors in borrowed scrubs, still panning slightly from the transition from plane to helicopter to corridor. You really need to stop sending helicopters for my friends, she told Harris. He smiled for the first time that night. Behind her, Charles Hargrove walked in more slowly. His white coat was gone. He wore the same shirt and tie from earlier, now creased. His eyes were shadowed as if he had not fully escaped the guilt that had sat on his desk with the suspension paper. He stopped short when he saw Maya. Dr. Carter, he said. Hargrove, she said. There were a dozen things that could have fit between them in that moment. Accusations, apologies, explanations. None of them were spoken. Come here, she said, instead nodding toward the monitor. You need to see our patient. Nash gave them a quick briefing. Ethan Ward. Their last line to someone who knew exactly where certain dangerous people liked to hide. A man who had already lived through more near misses than anyone should. Hargrove stared at the scan, his medical brain pushed to the front, outrunning his pride. This is like trying to pick glass out from behind a live wire, he said. You go in a fraction of an inch off, the whole cord goes offline. Yes, Maya said. That is why we do not go in off. And you have done this before, he said. She held his gaze. Twice, she said. Under what circumstances, he asked. Mortar fire, she said. No air conditioning, no backup. Monroe cleared her throat. For those who do not know, she said, looking at Hargrove and Jenna, Dr. Carter served as lead combat surgeon for special operations units in Afghanistan and Iraq. There were several occasions where her work was the only reason certain operations did not end in lists of casualties twice as long. Jenna had known pieces. Hearing it laid out like that still made her chest tighten. You were Ghost Hand, Jenna said softly, the nickname slipping out. She had heard it whispered once in a podcast about combat medics never thinking she would stand in the same room. Maya's face did not change. That was a story, she said. This is a spine. She turned away from the screen. You ready? She asked Jenna. Jenna squared her shoulders. Yes, she said. She looked at Hargrove. You? Maya asked. He took a breath. I am trying to be, he said. You tell me what you need, and I will be there. Good, she said. Scrub in 10. I want everyone in the room before they bring him down from the unit. In the scrub room, the three of them stood shoulder to shoulder at identical sinks. Water ran over their hands in 3 parallel streams. Jenna's fingers shook at first. She stilled them by pressing her palms together, then resumed the scrub. Hargrove watched his own reflection in the steel, seeing a face he barely recognized stripped of its usual certainty. Maya focused only on the sequence. Fingers, palms, wrists, forearms, rinse. Again. The motions grounded her as they always had. Vital signs are stable for now, a voice called from the OR. We are bringing him in. Let us go to work, she said. They stepped into the operating room as a team. They brought Ethan Ward in under a sheet of pale blue monitors, already singing in steady tones. He was taller than she expected. Up close, he had the lean build of someone who had not wasted much time in chairs. His face was slack under the effect of the anesthesia, but the lines around his mouth suggested that when he was awake, he clenched his jaw a lot. The bruising along his ribs faded into the taped dressings over his chest. The focus lay lower where the spinal column curved beneath the skin. Positioning looks good, the anesthesiologist said. We have him where neuromonitoring asked. The neuromonitoring tech sat near the head eyes on a separate screen, watching waves that represented impulses in nerves that most people never thought about. Maya took her place at the table. Jenna stood at her right, hands ready over the instrument tray. Hargrove took the opposite side shoulder's squared eyes on the field. Everyone knows the stakes, Maya said. I'm not repeating them. From this point, if you are in this room, you contribute or you stay out of the way. No one argued. She glanced at the clock, logged the time in her mind. Let us begin, she said. The first incision along the midline of the back was careful controlled. The skin opened cleanly, muscle followed handle gently to preserve as much as possible. The smell was different from abdomen work, stronger, heavier. Retractor, she said. Metal arms held back the tissue, exposing the pale arc of bone. The vertebrae sat there solid and quiet, hiding the trouble beneath. Orthopedic instruments came into play. A small window of bone opened under her hands, millimeter by millimeter. Bone dust mixed with saline into a fine paste that the suction pulled away. Heart rate steady, anesthesia called. Blood pressure 110/70. The neuromonitoring tech spoke for the first time. Baseline signals in the lower limbs are weak but present, he said. Upper limbs are normal. It was a strange thing Maya thought to operate on someone and have a live commentary of how their body reacted to each approach. She kept her hands light. The cord lay below, wrapped in its casing, delicate and firm at once. There, she said softly. The first sliver of metal glinted in the light. It was small, no larger than a piece of gravel, but positioned in a way that made it dangerous. Microforceps, she said. Jenna set them into her hand. Maya closed the tiny jaws around the fragment with infinite care, tightening just enough. She lifted, easing it out of the tissue that had gripped it for days. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the fragment came free. It landed in the small metal basin with a light tap. Signals unchanged, neuromonitoring said. No loss. One down, Maya replied. The next fragment was deeper. The third sat nearly at the edge of the canal like a threat that had decided to stay close. Time blurred. The clock moved, but the minutes felt strangely thick. Sweat gathered under her cap. Once Jenna reached up with a sterile gauze and blotted the skin just above Maya's eyebrow where moisture had started to sting her eyes. Last piece, Maya said. The room seemed to settle around those words. She could see it tucked close to the cord itself. One clumsy movement, one tremor, and the tips of the forceps would touch more than metal. Everyone stay still, she said. No sudden moves, no loud talking. A quiet that was almost reverent filled the room. Even the monitor seemed to soften its beeping. She let her breath slow. Her focus narrowed to a single point to steel and flesh, and the tiny space between them. Her hand went in. The scar on her wrist pulled slightly with the angle. Her fingers did not shake. She closed the forceps around the fragment and felt the faint resistance as the body tried to keep what had lodged there. She eased it free in a straight line, her mind tracking every sensation. For a moment, the fragment and the cord shared the same tight space. Then the gap widened and the piece rose away. It dropped into the basin with a second soft tap, a twin to the first. Signal's stable, the tech said. His voice cracked just a little. Good, Maya said. She took another breath deeper this time. Her shoulders loosened by a fraction. Inspect the canal, she said to Hargrove. Tell me if you see anything I missed. He leaned in, eyes intent. For the first time since she had met him, there was no trace of arrogance in his posture, only complete absorption in the work. It is clean, he said. No visible fragments, no obvious swelling beyond expected. All right, she said. Let us close. The rest felt almost simple by comparison. Muscle, fascia, skin. Each layer brought Ethan Ward a little closer back to being a person instead of a puzzle. 3 hours and 50 minutes after they started, she placed the last suture. How are his numbers, she asked. Stable, anesthesia said. Better than at induction, actually. Maya stepped back. He goes to intensive care, she said. Prone for now. Watch for swelling, watch for infection. No one touches his line without gloves twice over. The nurses moved inefficient. Machines were unhooked, then reattached as they transferred him to a bed. Maya stripped off her gloves. Underneath her hands were stiff, the joints protesting their long grip on fine instruments. The skin over the scar had reddened. She walked out of the OR and into the scrub room. The water in the sink was still running from earlier, an oversight no one had noticed in the tension. She placed her hands under the stream. The water was cold, almost shocking. Blood and iodine and invisible traces of someone else's danger washed away. Jenna came in after a moment, rolling her shoulders. He is still with us, Jenna said. He needs to wake up and move his toes before I believe it fully, Maya said. One thing at a time, Jenna replied. They dried their hands in silence. In the small debriefing room next door, Director Nash waited. A pot of coffee sat between stacks of medical notes and a laptop. Monroe stood near the wall, arms folded. She nodded as they came in. How did it go, Nash asked. We removed all visible fragments, Maya said. No loss of signals during any critical maneuver. If his cord tolerates the post-operative swelling, he has a real chance. A chance to walk, Nash asked. A chance to stand, Maya said. Maybe more. Bodies do what they want. I do not make promises for them. Nash sat down heavily. That is more hope than we had 16 hours ago, he said. He tapped a key on his laptop. A document filled the screen, a set of lines and numbers that looked dry until you read the labels. While you were operating, he said, we pulled your full service record from archives, the unredacted version. Maya's jaw tightened. I did not ask you to do that, she said. You did not have to, Nash said. You know how this works. We vetted you for this kind of responsibility a long time ago. He rotated the laptop so that Hargrove and Jenna could see. Rows of deployments. Kandahar, Helmand, Mosul, Raqqa, units with names most civilians never heard. A column at the side tracked surgeries performed. Another marked outcomes. 53 major combat surgeries. 0 losses in cases where the patient reached the table alive. Awards listed in dense text. A Silver Star, a Purple Heart, citations for actions under fire. Jenna read her throat tight. Hargrove read his hands gripping the back of a chair. You carried this around and did not tell anyone, he said. I told HR I had a prior service, Maya said. It was in the system. Not like this, he said. If I had walked into St. Augustine waving this in their faces, she said, what would you have thought? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I would have thought you were impossible, he admitted, that you believed yourself above scrutiny. And I do not want to be that kind of doctor, she said. Nash closed the laptop. Regardless of what you want to be, he said, there are things people need to know now. You saved one of our teams twice this week. That kind of connection has consequences. He reached for a folder on the table and handed it to her. The man you operated on at St. Augustine, he said. The John Doe with the gunshot wound. He is Ethan Ward's partner, deep undercover. The explosion downtown was an attempt to finish what that bullet started. Maya opened the folder. A photo stared back at her. The man on the table in Chicago this time, upright in a polo shirt and a ball cap, holding a beer beside a grill. He looked ordinary in a way that was almost jarring. You kept a unit we rely on alive, as Nash said. Twice, that matters. It mattered to them before it mattered to your numbers, she said. True, he said, but now it will matter to people with titles, which means papers will move. He stood. We will give you a few hours to rest, he said. There is a room down the hall. Then we will fly you back to Chicago. Your hospital will be receiving a commendation from us with a summary of your service record attached. Maya almost smiled at that. They will love that, she said. They will have to deal with it, Nash replied. Ethan Ward woke up 3 days later. He opened his eyes in a quiet ICU room. The first thing he saw was the pale ceiling. The second was the face of Colonel Monroe. The third was his feet under a sheet. Move them, he said, voice dry. Good morning to you too, Monroe said. Try wiggling your toes. He did. It felt like a long delay between thought and motion, but under the sheet his toes shifted. Who did this? He asked. Someone who does not enjoy paperwork, Monroe said. In Chicago, St. Augustine Medical Center received a sealed envelope from a federal courier. The board gathered in a private room to open it. The letter inside bore a government seal and a set of signatures that meant attention. The commendation was straightforward. It thanked the institution for facilitating emergency support to an ongoing operation. It named Dr. Maya Elise Carter as a key part of that support. Attached with redactions that left the important lines clear enough was a portion of her military record. There was a long silence at the table as they read. Within hours, someone talked to someone they should not have. The story spread faster than anyone could manage. Suspended surgeon is decorated war doctor, one headline read. The Angel of Kandahar works in Chicago and gets benched, another said. Camera crews began to appear on the sidewalk outside the hospital. Reporters waited in the lobby, asking visitors if they had ever seen Dr. Carter. Did she seem like a hero? Hargrove could not walk down the hall without feeling the weight of eyes on his back. His email filled with messages from colleagues across the country. Some were sympathetic, some were not. He wrote a letter of resignation and slid it across the table to the hospital board. They pushed it back. You do not get to step sideways, the chair said. You stay, you fix what you can. The Department of Health and Human Services called a week later. They had been watching the coverage. They had also been watching the tapes from the night of the explosion where a suspended doctor had gone against orders and saved multiple lives by acting without waiting for a senior signature. A draft policy began to take shape first in committee rooms, then in formal language. It proposed that in life, threatening emergencies attending physicians on scene would have protected authority to act without prior administrative approval if delay would endanger a patient. The working name was clumsy. The people writing it started calling it the Carter provision in their own notes. The name stayed. Months later, at a national medical conference, Charles Hargrove stood at a podium in front of hundreds of physicians. A slide behind him showed the title, The Carter Protocol and the Cost of Hesitation. He took a breath and spoke into the microphone. "I am here," he said, "because I made mistakes from a position of authority." He told them about a night in an operating room with a nameless patient and a doctor whose scarred hands did not shake. He told them about credentials that did not look impressive on paper and about how tightly he had held to his own sense of status. He did not spare himself. Near the front of the auditorium, Jenna sat with a folded conference program in her lap, listening. When he finished, the audience rose. The applause rolled over him like a wave. He nodded once, then stepped away from the light. At St. Augustine, the board called Maya in for a meeting she had not requested. They offered her a new contract. Director of Emergency Medicine, full authority over protocols, a team of her choosing, a title that matched the responsibilities she already seemed to shoulder. She sat in the leather chair across from them and listened. The hospital smelled the same as it always had: coffee, floor wax, a faint undercurrent of anxiety. "Thank you," she said when they finished. "I am not accepting." They blinked. "We are not sure we understand," one of them said. "I came here to work in the trauma bay," she said. "Not a boardroom. If I take that position, I spend more time in meetings than with patients. That is not where I am useful." "You could change the culture," another suggested. "I already did that without a corner office," she said. Later, in the small hospital chapel, she sat alone for a while in the back pew. The stained glass windows filtered the city light into muted colors on the floor. Jenna slipped in and slid onto the bench beside her. "They looked like someone canceled their gala," Jenna said. "They will recover," Maya replied. "You really turned down director," Jenna said. "I did," Maya said. "Most people would kill for that," Jenna said. "Most people have different ghosts," Maya said. They sat in easy quiet for a bit. "In Kandahar," Maya said after a moment, "no one cared about my title. They cared that their friend stopped bleeding." Jenna looked at her hands resting on her knees. The faint scar caught the colored light, a pale line. "Here," Jenna said, "they are finally starting to care about the same thing." 3 years later, a sign hung over the entrance to a long, low building in a valley in Western Virginia. Med Front Institute, it read, Frontline Medical Training. The building had been a barn once. The beams still smelled faintly of hay when the rain came. Now the interior held rows of tables, shelves of supplies, a collection of training mannequins with replaceable limbs and torsos. Sunlight spilled through open doors. The sound of traffic was distant, just a low murmur from the highway beyond the trees. Inside, a group of trainees gathered around a table. They came from different places: a volunteer firefighter, a school teacher, a paramedic student, a farmer whose hands were calloused from a different kind of work. On the table, a plastic limb bled bright red fluid from a hidden tank. "High on the thigh," Maya said. "Closer to the body than feels comfortable. The point is to trap the blood before it escapes." She wore jeans and a plain shirt. No coat. Her scar was visible when she pushed her sleeves back to demonstrate the placement of a tourniquet. The trainees watched as she tightened the strap until the flow stopped. "If they can still feel your kindness," she said, "you probably did not pull hard enough." A chuckle went around the group, tense at first, then looser. "All right," she said. "Your turn. Rotate through. I will correct you." They started. She moved among them, adjusting grips, nudging elbows, giving firm praise when they got it right. In the late afternoon, when the session ended and the last student left with a packet of notes and a practice bandage in hand, the barn grew quiet. Hargrove stood in the doorway watching. He was older now. His hair had thinned at the temples, and he wore a light jacket instead of a white coat. Retirement had softened the sharp lines in his posture, but not erased them. "You found your place," he said as she came over. She wiped her hands on a towel more out of habit than need. "I found a place," she said. "They listen to you," he said. "They have a reason to," she said. "Someone might need them." They walked outside together. The evening air was cool. The hills in the distance caught the last light. "I have been writing," he said, "about leadership, about the moments that show you who you are." "And you came to ask if you can use my story," she said. He smiled slightly. "That obvious," he said. "You carry a notebook," she said. "You never did that before." He glanced at the small book in his hand, then nodded. "If it helps someone else pause before they dismiss the wrong person," he said, "is that all right with you?" "Yes," she said. "Use what you need." He hesitated. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, "about how this all unfolded?" "I regret the people who almost died while we argued about paper," she said. "I do not regret staying quiet about my medals. If I had led with those, I would have become the kind of doctor I never wanted to be. The kind who thinks the story is about them," he said. "Something like that," she said. They walked back toward the building. Near the entrance, a wooden board hung on the wall. The grain of the wood had been polished by careful hands. At the top, someone had carved words with a steady tool, in memory of those who healed before they were believed. Below, rows of names had been burned into the surface: medics, nurses, doctors, some with dates, some without, some from wars that made the news, some from incidents that never did. Maya lifted a small metal tag from her pocket and added it to a hook at the bottom. The tag bore only initials and a year. Hargrove read them, then stepped back. "This is beautiful," he said. "It is needed," she replied. "People forget the quiet ones first." Later, when the sky had turned a soft blue-gray and the first stars pricked through, she stayed behind in the training bay. The tables were cleared. The plastic limbs had been stacked on shelves. On one of the stainless steel sinks, a thin line of dried red training fluid traced the path where earlier she had rinsed equipment. She turned on the tap. Water ran clear over stainless steel, washing away the last of the artificial blood. Her hands moved under the stream, fingers, palms, wrists, the same rhythm she had used in tents and hospitals and now in a converted barn. The scar along her wrist caught the light, a pale line against her skin. Through the open doors, she heard the sound of a siren on the highway. Not loud, just a distant rising and falling note that blended with the evening insects. She stood very still, listening. Somewhere someone was having a very bad day. Somewhere another set of hands would be called to act. "They will be all right," she said quietly. "Someone will be there." The wind slid through the doorway, carrying the last warmth of the day with it. It ruffled the edges of the training manuals on the table, made the hooks on the memorial board clink together softly. Behind her, footsteps approached. A young man stood in the doorway, backpack over one shoulder, hesitation in his stance. "Am I too late to sign up for the next course?" he asked. Maya turned off the tap and dried her hands. "No," she said. "You are right on time." She stepped forward, extending one hand to him. His grip was tentative, then firmer. "Come in," she said. "We have some things to practice." Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.